Hello and welcome, it's Chris from Christopher Holt Training. Welcome to this tutorial where we're going to talk about building core strength and stability. Now, in previous videos, I've just either talked about core strength or I've talked about core stability. Now, in stability ones that I've talked about before, we've used the bird dog, which is where we go down onto all fours and then we come up into this position, which is focusing on the stability elements of it, so the balance, the muscle timing, the coordination, the proprioceptive part of it. And then in core strengthening exercises or tutorials, we've talked about the plank, the side plank, the bridge, which are more holding a posture. Well, what we're going to do in this tutorial is mash those together. So we're going to be using a plank, but we're going to add a variation to it. So the four things that we're going to be focusing on is, first of all, I'm going to quickly talk you through muscle binding. So getting all the muscles working together. Then there's going to be a muscle timing element to it. Then we're going to add in some extra neural overflow to get some more strength out of it and more stability out of it. And then finally, we're going to look at some how we then go about, or first of all, what the energy leaks could be, and then how we go about reducing it. But we'll kind of talk about those as we go through. Quickly, before we get into the main bulk of what we're going to be talking about, what I have to mention is there are some prerequisites to this. So there are some things that we need to be, or at least have some degree of competency at before we go into them. So we've got things like breathing. So when people go down and hold a plank, they will hold their breath. So we need to be able to cycle some breathing as we're doing the exercise. What also we need to be able to do is have the ability to brace. And then also the ability to brace and breathe. So what we're basically doing is, if you were working with me through my online coaching or online courses, we would work on this previous. So I'm just assuming that that's in place. So we've worked on the breathing, we've built up the ability to hold the posture, some relative core strength. What we're then doing is putting the breathing and the bracing together. What we then need to be thinking about is the joint awareness. So what our body's doing and when it's doing it. So that will come up more when we talk about the energy leaks. So it's these other sort of prerequisites that we need to be thinking about before we get started. So what I'm doing now is I'm assuming that I've got it and that you've got it. So this is where we would go next. Part number one of this is the muscle binding element to it. Now this is the bracing element. So we've previously talked about it, or I've previously talked about it in past tutorials, but we just want to bind the muscles together. So we want to be able to brace the abdominals, the glutes, and the shoulders. So I'm going to go down into a plank and do this. So what we do is we come down, we got to make sure forearms are parallel. For this exercise as well, it's not going to be a traditional plank. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this up now. So we're going to have feet wide, arms narrow. This is just going to give us a bit of extra base for what we do next. But the first part of this is being holding, bracing the abdominals like so, squeezing the glutes, and then bringing the shoulders back and down. So we've now bound all of that together. So we've now got that whole system working as one unit. So that obviously comes in in sort of the traditional planking core strength part of it, just getting all those muscles to bind together so they can work properly. So what we can then move on to is, once we're holding that position solid and we've got the glutes and the hips, the glutes and the core working together, we can then move on to the muscle timing part, which is what's going to come next. So what we're going to do there is we're then going to put the two together. Now this requires, and we don't know who's ready for this until they do it. So you might find that your hips are moving all over the place whilst you do it, which is something that we want to try and avoid. So when it comes on to the muscle timing part of it, we're going to go back down into that position. We're going to set up, arms narrow, feet wide, stomach braced, glutes squeezed, shoulders back and down. And what we're then going to do is we're going to lift an arm and pop it on our lower back. Now the goal for this is not only to be able to get into that posture, but it's also to keep the hips centered. So as we lift the arm up, put it on the back, we stay centered, and then even when we go back down, place the arm back down and lift the other one up, we again want to keep the hips centered, because that's something that so many people miss when they start doing an exercise like this. It could be up on the hands where you do the shoulder taps. Their hips are moving all over the place. That's something that we want to avoid, and we want to keep them centered. So when we talk about muscle timing, what we need is we've got the muscles bound together so they're pre-tensed. What will happen when you lift an arm and put it on your back is it will engage that little bit more, because the muscles, when you lift this arm up, these muscles have got to engage to keep your shoulder up and to keep your hips level. So that is where we get the muscle timing. If there is movement, then we haven't got the muscle timing, and it's slightly out. So what we need to do is we need to bring that back in. So what that looks like in practice is if we come down, we'll set up exactly the same again. So we've got feet wide, arms narrow, tummy's tight, glutes squeezed, shoulders back and down. So we're pre-tensed. What we're then going to do is lift up, hold, come back down. Then when we change over, this is important to hold and change. And then bring down, and then change again. And then relax. So what we've got there is, as I'm lifting my arm up, it's doing some additional tensioning, and I'm bringing it on there. What then is happening, as I come back down, what most people want to do is put their arm down and relax. When they do that, that's when they get all the hip movement. So what they want to do is keep tense. Again, keep that muscles bound together, the abdominal wall, the glutes and the shoulders. Place the arm down and lift the other one up smoothly so you maintain the proper position of the hips. Now that we've got muscle binding, so we've bound everything together, we're keeping the hips still, so we've then got the good muscle timing. What we can then do is add some extra neural drive. Now what this is going to do, this is going to add extra strength, and in some respects, because we've got that extra strength, it's going to add that extra stability to it as well. So what that basically means is when we lift the left arm, we're going to be holding and tensioning the right arm. So we're going to take a fist and we're going to squeeze it as hard as we can. So we've got the shoulder down, we've got the fist squeezed, we've got the biceps and the triceps working, we've got the forearm muscles working. That's going to create extra tension through the entire system. And again, it's going to encourage extra neural drive to hold a stronger, more robust position, as I mentioned at the start. So the setup is exactly the same. So we come down, we go into this position, narrow arms, wide feet, tense the abdominals, tense the glutes, shoulders back and down. Now I'm going to lift my left arm first, so I'm going to squeeze my right, and I'm holding. Then I'm going to come down, squeeze my left, and then again come back down, squeeze my right, keeping everything tight, and relax. So that there is then giving me some additional strength, some additional stability, and it's keeping my hips nice and solid. Those are essentially the three things that we need to be able to perform that correctly. What we can then start talking about, which is what we'll look at now, are the energy leaks. So the energy leaks is any movement within the body. So if you see anyone doing an exercise like this where they're lifting any limb, could be an arm, could be a leg, if their hips are moving, if their torso's twisting, if their hips are rotating, whatever it might be, that is an energy leak. The more stable we can stay in that posture, we're minimizing the amount of energy that we're leaking out, because all that does, that then just translates out into other exercises. If we're doing a deadlift, for example, we come into this position, we want to be able to lift like so. If what happens, we sort of come up, back rounds, and then we come up, we've just leaked a lot of energy there. So all the tension that we've created through the legs and the energy that the muscles are using, is getting leaked out of the lower back or out of the hips. So what we want to be able to do is keep the hips stationary, as I've been mentioning, all the way through. Because what people will find, and these are some of the ways that that the energy leaks happen, is they get lazy when they lift an arm up or when they're changing the arms over. So what can happen is we come into this position, they aren't tight, they aren't tense, and then that type of thing can happen. That type of thing can happen. Or it could be that they shift over or shift over. All of those are energy leaks out of the torso, and we want to try and avoid them. So what we want to try and do is, as I mentioned, the most important bit is the transition, when you put one arm down and bring the other one up. So what we want to be doing is putting them down gently. So we come down, again we get everything tense, we come up, we go down, we smoothly pop it down and then come up the other side. But the whole time we're keeping the tension on, because a lot of people, when they put the arm down, they'll lose the tension and then they'll try and bring it back on again. That's where the energy leak happens. They relax and they contract again. What we're trying to do when we put down, we're trying to keep the tension on, and then as we lift up, obviously the tension will go back on because we're lifting the arm back up. So those are the 4 parts that are going to help build core strength and stability. Now, with regards to exercises, there are other exercises that will do this, but this is a very simple exercise to start with, and it gets across all the different principles as well. So to quickly summarize what we've talked about so far, we've been talking about core strength and stability. So core strength is where we're holding a posture, and then we build that endurance, and then when we require muscle timing, balance, or some degree of proprioception or coordination, this is where the stability comes in. So when we're lifting an arm up, it's causing greater tension, and that's going to increase the stability within the body. So it's going to make the body more stable. So that's what we use the arm raise for. So we need then the prerequisites, which are having good muscular endurance anyway, so you're able to hold the plank. You can breathe within that. You can brace, and you're aware of what your joints are doing. So you're aware if there's any movement in the hips. You're aware of what your arms are doing and how they're transitioning between each arm. So those, in some respects, are the prerequisites. So when we then come to talk about the exercise, first of all, we've got the binding of the muscles. So we've got the abdominal brace, the glute squeeze, and the shoulders back and down. So we've bound all of that together. Then we've got the arm raise, which is the lifting of the arm, and that's going to create the muscle timing. What we've also then got is the transition when we put the arm down and pick the other one up. That's also another part of muscle timing, because they're going to relax as you put one down, and then as you pick the other one up, the other side is going to activate. So we've got the muscle binding, we've got the muscle timing. What we've then got is the neural drive, so we can use when we lift the left arm up, we tense with the right side, we change over, we tense the left, and then we bring the other one up. So that's just going to create extra neural drive into this area to create more tension to be able to hold that position more effectively. And then number 4, we've got the minimizing or reducing of energy leaks, which is essentially doing everything that we've talked about before, but we're just trying to minimize the weight shift of the hips, the rotation of the hips, and any movement within the shoulder. So what we're basically looking for is you're completely still all the way through. So that is, I guess, the principles of core strength and stability, and there's an exercise and an example that you can start using that you can then extrapolate out into other exercises. So many thanks for watching. I hope this has been helpful. My name is Chris from Chris for Whole Training. I'll speak to you in the next tutorial.